And I know that what Morgan was saying to us is that he now is very, very powerful, that he can do things, he can manipulate things. I want to just say a few stories that are much more important that Morgan has done with his strength that are just incredible. One of them, when he was a cheerleader at U of A, the mascot, Wilbur Wildcat, was one of his best friends. His name is Dan, and Dan decided to become a firefighter after leaving college. And one of the first jobs when he was in Peoria, he was in a garage with a friend of his who's also a firefighter. The friend had put the car in neutral. He was waiting. Dan was going to push the car out of the garage to save it. And all of a sudden, he felt two hands grabbing him from behind. He was pulled off his feet and backward, and an air conditioning unit fell right where he would have been standing. And so Dan is certain that it was Morgan that saved him.
I just
Also,
got goosebumps all over my whole body. My guest today is Elizabeth Boisson, whose son Morgan died at the base of the Everest mountain. And after that, she began receiving signs from Morgan, letting her know that love lives on. And as a result, she has started this amazing organization called Helping Parents Heal. And today we're going to talk about signs and synchronicities. And you will be inspired to be able to see your own signs from your own passed away loved one. So I'm so excited to have this conversation. Elizabeth, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
for having me, Lori. I'm really excited to be here and to talk to you about the signs and synchronicities that we get from our loved ones in spirit.
Elizabeth, I don't think I've ever had more things in common with anybody I've ever interviewed. So we've met already in person because we live in the same small town, Cave Creek, Arizona, of 7,000 people, which is a crazy coincidence just to begin with, of all the places to wind up in the world. We both have had passed away loved ones who died, who have sent us signs, so many signs that we both wrote a book about signs and synchronicities. And now you are on this mission to share the fact that after our loved ones pass away, they're not truly gone. And you've started this wonderful organization, Helping Parents Heal. And I've created this YouTube channel to help give people like you a platform so that people understand we don't really die. Love is, never ends. And our loved ones are always with us. So I am just like so thrilled to be able to have a conversation like this with you today.
Well, I am too. It's exciting to be able to speak to you after, I guess, living in the same town for quite some time. And I also think that it is pretty amazing to think that a town of the size of 7,000 people has so many really interesting people who either live or visit here and who get it. I think that's important to say, that they understand that our loved ones in spirit are not gone, that they are part of our lives every day, that they send us incredible signs, and that they want us to be happy and to move forward. But one of the things that I know that you're doing, and that I feel that I'm doing as well, is being able to make them proud by continuing
Aw.
to do things that help others, and helping others helps both you and me even more than it does the people that we help.
So I want to share with you about a week after we met in person, we had coffee together at this little cute place in downtown Cave Creek. I was driving out of the Walmart and there was a sticker on the car in front of me. And I'm super aware of this place because one of my boyfriends that I had was trending to climb Mount Everest, and he had been to Everest base camp. So if I'd ever seen this before, I would have it in my memory. But in front of me was a sticker that said Everest base camp. I took a picture of it, And it immediately reminded me of you. And it was within a week of us meeting together. So I felt like Morgan was sending me his own sign because I think it was about the exact same time that you scheduled this interview with me.
That's amazing. And I must say that I have a friend who lives in Scottsdale, northern Scottsdale. So she's on Joe Max. And she organizes events for fundraisers for all different people throughout the valley. But she has a group of firefighter friends who all went to the base camp of Mount Everest. And then they climbed Mount Everest and they brought back medals for Morgan. So this was just recently. This was probably 5 years ago. So we have two medals from these guys that went all the way up Everest. Maybe this is one of those people that you actually saw in the parking lot, which is pretty cool.
It totally could have been, but like I said, it's one of those things. Or sometimes I think people, when they're looking for signs and synchronicities, they think, "Oh, I'm just tuned in to this, and I didn't notice it before." A sign like that for me, I absolutely would have noticed if I'd ever seen anything like that before. I never have, but I thought it was so synchronistic that I saw it right after we met, and you had scheduled the interview to come on and talk on the show. So this is great. Well, why don't you talk about your connection to Morgan and what happened to him and how this all started?
I would love to. And I know that a lot of people wonder if it's hard for me to talk about Morgan or about Chelsea, but I really appreciate being able to talk about both of them whenever I am in an interview. And I'll start with Chelsea, if that's okay, because
Sure, absolutely.
transitioned when we were in France and I had been pregnant. I was on an IV because I was having contractions. Morgan was 2 years old at the time, and I, as I say, I had been in the hospital for 2 months. It was very difficult. The pregnancy was not an easy one, but I finally ended up having my water burst. I wasn't able to carry her any farther. And so at that point, I had Chelsea, and she only survived for 2 days because my obstetrician didn't want me to have her when my water burst. And so I was waiting for a week before I was able to have her, but I kept feeling that she was moving less. And it was devastating, of course. But at the same time, I hadn't seen Morgan for 2 months, and being able to get back to him really saved me. He had been with my mother in law in a town that wasn't very close to where I was at the hospital, and he wasn't really able to come to the hospital to see me. So being back with Morgan saved me. I also, at that time, was doing a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga, because I'd lived in India for such a long time. And those were a huge part of my life. And I think that those two things were also instrumental in being able to help me move forward and heal. But I wasn't really interested or even thinking about the afterlife at that point. And then something earth shaking happened, which was having my son transition at the base camp of Mount Everest. He had been in Nanjing studying with a group of students from the University of Arizona. And they went over to, first of all, they were in Nanjing. He had been there 2 years before, so he spoke Chinese better than everyone else. He was a senior by that time, and he was kind of the leader of the group. They called him Big Bear on his cheerleading team for the University of Arizona because of his huge bear hugs. 6'6", 280 pounds. He was on the football team here in Cave Creek at Cactus Shadows, and I didn't want him playing football because of the fact that I thought it was too dangerous at U of A. And instead, he was a cheerleader, which apparently there are more injuries as a cheerleader than there are in football because there are just so many things that can happen. But he loved it, and he met so many girls, and he was the big brother of everyone. And as I say, he was nicknamed Big Bear. And that was his personality. He was just an incredible, loving, huge presence. And as they were going up the mountain, so first of all, They flew to Lhasa at 11,000 feet, and there were 14 of them. They were supposed to have two professors with them who ended up not going. And the next morning, they left on a bus to go up to the base camp of Mount Everest. And that was a difference of, 8,000 feet. So they had already arrived in Lhasa at 11,000 feet. Then they went up the mountain to 19,000 feet. And as they were moving up the mountain, the kids were throwing up. They were getting off the bus and throwing up. Morgan was helping them by holding their heads. He was trying to help out, but none of these kids recognized the signs of altitude sickness. They started urinating on themselves in the bus, which is a definite sign of altitude sickness, but they didn't realize. And so they finally arrived and they only had a Chinese tour guide pushing them up the mountain because of the fact that he wanted to get to the base camp before nightfall. So when they got up to the base camp of Mount Everest, Morgan had a terrible migraine, and the only thing that he had to take for it was NyQuil. So he took NyQuil, he went to bed, and in the middle of the night, he got up and he was wandering around the yurt, which is a huge tent that they were sleeping in, calling these kids by the wrong name, which is also a sign of altitude sickness, being delirious like that. And the next morning, when everyone woke up to go back down the mountain, Morgan didn't wake up. He was foaming at the mouth. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, when they were supposed to leave, one of the kids called his mother, who was in Washington State, and asked what to do. And she said, get him down the mountain as quickly as possible. That's altitude sickness. You need to get him down. In the meantime, and just to let you know, these poor kids, my son is and was 280 pounds, 6'6". So it took all 13 of them to load him on the bus and to start down the mountain. And during this time, the director of the program, who's in the States, he was down in Tucson, called me and said that Morgan was very sick, that they were evacuating him, and would I like the phone number of his roommate? And I said, yes, I would love the phone number of his roommate. I didn't know how bad it was at the time. And when I called Colin, Colin said, Miss Boisson, it doesn't look good. He's stopped breathing. We've taken him off the bus and he's on the ground. We're trying CPR on him, which is something that none of the kids really knew how to do. And I immediately said, Colin, please put the phone up to his ear. And when he did, I said, we love you, we're proud of you, and don't be afraid. And at that moment, I had the biggest hug from Morgan. And I know it was his hug. It was his incredible bear hug. And I felt it from 3,000 miles away. He was in Tibet and I was here in Cave Creek, Arizona, and nothing had ever happened like this before. I've since understood that it's a shared death experience, and it was pretty incredible. But it allowed me to know that love lives forever, that Morgan would always be with me, and that he was in an incredible place. I felt this incredible bliss that he was experiencing. And my husband, who was beside me, who was waiting to speak to Morgan, said, put Morgan on the line. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't think that he can speak to you. And my husband was devastated because it didn't happen to him in the same way. But since he's understood, my daughters were with us that evening as well. I really can't explain. I couldn't explain for such a long time how I was so okay with the fact that Morgan had transitioned. The only thing that I knew was that it was something that probably was happening to other parents when their children transition. And I wanted to find other parents who had this happen. I've since found out that Chelsea was the first person to meet him when he transitioned, and she grabbed his hand and led him to me. And so that was the reason that I got that incredible hug. So it doesn't necessarily always happen this way, but for me it did, and I was so grateful for that. And I think that it was meant to be because I went to so many support groups right after this happened, trying to find other parents who had this same thing happen. And the support groups at the time, this was in 2009, would tell me, I'm sorry, we don't talk about those kinds of things in this group. And so I wasn't allowed to talk about these signs that were happening. Not just that, but there were things happening in my house with the electricity and the water and all different kinds of things. And people would come up to me in the parking lot after from these meetings and they'd say, tell us more about this because this is the same thing that's happening to me. I had the same thing happen with my son or my daughter. And I'd say, yeah, I think it's something that happens to all of us. And I think that the most important thing, as you've been able to do, is to be able to recognize these signs and say, hey, I got it, send me more. And they will.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, thank you so much. I mean, I could feel so much as you were saying all of that. Like it was making me teary-eyed, but also joyous because having been on the other side several times and understanding what you were talking about, that profound love, and you being able to have that transfer and feel that, I can understand how that would have made you react the way that you did. So, can you share with us, do you remember the very first sign that you got from Morgan that let you know without a doubt, aside from the hug, that he was still around everybody?
I can. And my goodness gracious, it happened just a few days later. I was in yoga teacher training. I was training to be a yoga teacher, and that's what I do now. But the studio that I was training at, I spent quite some time not going to the studio because I wanted to hike to every single mountain behind the house instead. I felt like if I was moving into Shavasana, which is corpse pose where you're very quiet, that I would probably have a hard time doing that. And it turned out that there was a medium that went to that studio to look for a space to rent, which is very unusual because there was no reason that she would have ever needed to rent a studio at that particular yoga studio or a room. And the person who owned the yoga studio didn't believe in the afterlife or necessarily. Uh, the medium said, is there anything that I can read so that I can show that I'm for real? Because Angie, who owned the studio, was thinking that, I don't know anything about mediums. How do I test to see if she knows anything? And so Suzanne Wilson said, do you have a picture that I could read? Angie took a picture of my 3 kids that I had just sent out for a holiday card. As soon as Morgan transitioned, I sent out a holiday card to everyone, kind of to let them know what had happened, but also to let everyone know that I knew that Morgan was still with us. So it was a picture of Morgan with his 2 sisters, but there was no text. And Suzanne Wilson took it and she immediately said that she saw Morgan on a mountain, that he was saying he was okay with a megaphone. And Morgan, of course, was a U of A cheerleader. We had the megaphone at his celebration of life. He said that there was a band of 3 brothers. And in fact, when he transitioned, his roommate, Colin, and another one of his roommates, Matt, stayed in Lhasa for 5 days as my husband was getting a Tibetan visa. My husband had an office in Beijing and in Hong Kong, so he was able to get into China, but he had to wait to get a Tibetan visa. So these kids waited for my husband. So the band of 3 brothers referenced them. It said that one of these brothers was going to be bringing back a rock, and Suzanne drew it with a crack in the middle from the place that Morgan transitions. And it turns out that Colin arrived at our doorstep a month later with this beautiful rock that was split in 2 that looked exactly like the drawing that Suzanne Wilson had done for us. She also said that she smelled the smell of rum. And it's true that in high school, Morgan was called Captain Morgan. And so she was imagining the pirate with the hat on his head. And Morgan definitely was identified that way by lots of people in high school. And he was the captain of his football team. He was the one who put everybody through the different exercises and everything during football practice. So it made complete sense. But I was not even at that reading. So there was no way that Suzanne was reading me. This was very recent, so it wasn't something that was in the news. And what was really amazing is that Angie was just writing this down. She didn't know either. She didn't know exactly how Morgan transitioned. But she called me later that day and she said to me, Elizabeth, I had this woman come to the office and she told me all this stuff about Morgan. Is it okay if we have lunch tomorrow? And I said, Angie, we're not going to have lunch tomorrow. Could we just go ahead and talk about this on the phone? And we'll have, I mean, I said, we can have lunch tomorrow, but I definitely want to hear what she had to say right away. And it was incredible. The things that she said were all completely right. And in fact, I tried to get a reading with this woman, with Suzanne Wilson, and her husband was very sick at the time. So it took 2 months. And by the time that I was finally able to speak to her, she came to our house and she had met the co-founder of Helping Parents Heal, Mark Ireland, whose son also passed on a mountain, but on the McDowell mountain range. So here in Scottsdale, and he wrote a book about it and he signed the book for me because he heard that she was going to be doing a reading for me. And she brought it to that first meeting. And I immediately got in touch with Mark because for me, I had a very hard time up until that point meeting other people who had similar experiences and who were experiencing the same thing that I was. So those two experiences were so validating for me, as well as meeting Dr. Raymond Moody very early on in my journey, talking about my shared death experience with him and having that validated. In fact, his first book about shared death experiences has a video with Paul Perry. And when I searched shared death experiences on the internet, his video popped up. I was starting to watch the video, and the video was made, it said at the very beginning, October 20th, 2009, which is the exact day of passing of Morgan at the base camp of Mount Everest.
Wow. Well, for the people who are watching who don't know, Dr. Raymond Moody wrote a book called Life After Life. It was published, I think, in 1979, 80. What was it? What
75, yeah.
75. It was early. And this was he was a doctor. He had heard these stories. He started to interview people and he was just astonished by these near-death experience stories. And he is the person who coined the term NDE. And we also have that in common because Dr. Raymond Moody wrote a jacket cover comment for my book, Signs Surround You. So all these nutty coincidences, and I'm using air quotes when I say that, but I think it's so amazing that you and I both had a very similar path when our passed away loved ones transitioned. The first thing we wanted to do was talk to somebody who is an evidential medium, or for in my case, I was seeking it out. In your case, it found you. But an evidential medium that is really good and is a facilitator will often bring through not only evidential information that they could not possibly have known, but also bring the personality through of the loved one so that there's no doubt that who you are communicating with is your passed away loved one.
Exactly. Yes. And it's so interesting because, as you say, I wasn't looking for it. In fact, when we lived in India, my mom, who was with the UN Women's Club, she would do things like levitation. She would also go to see not a medium, but a psychic in Old Delhi, up back staircases and all different kinds of things. And I was never interested because I didn't want to know my future. And I didn't know what was going to happen in my life. I just wanted to live my life because it was beautiful and I was happy where I was. But anytime that something like this happens, when we have a loved one transition and we want to know where they are, I think that our learning exponential just goes through the roof, and we find out things that are actually very magical. And this journey of healing doesn't have to be a sad one. And that's something that I think you've understood. I've understood too, that we meet some of the most incredible people on this journey.
Yeah, for sure. I love the story of Mark Ireland and how he was brought to you through that book, and he wound up being your co-founder for helping parents heal. So I want to come back a little bit more to signs and synchronicities, and then I want to transition and talk more about your organization. So you mentioned that you were getting all kinds of electronic signs that Morgan was around you. And this is one of the ways that spirits love to communicate, because on the other side, their vibration is so high. They don't have the limitations that we would think of as limitations. Like, you're not going to walk in a room and be able to make the lights flash, likely, unless you've spent a lot of time learning how to somehow manipulate electronics. Most people in the world are not going to be able to do that, but our loved ones in spirit often can make electronics change, can freeze screens. And I'll share a couple of stories of mine also, but I would love to first of all hear the ones that you got from Morgan that let you know, okay, something is going on that didn't just affect you because you already knew, but also touched your family.
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, there were things going on in the house constantly, and that was not as big as this one, for instance. Right after Suzanne Wilson came and did that first reading for us, she said, Morgan says to look up. And we were like, okay, look up. What are we supposed to be doing? The next day, I was coming home from grocery shopping. It was kind of a warm day, and I smelled insulation in the garage. And I thought, this is weird. I never smell insulation in the garage. I looked up above our golf cart, and there was a trap door that was slid open. And our golf cart, first of all, is electric. So you have to have the key to be able to get it out of the garage. Second of all, it's the roof of the golf cart is not strong enough, not sturdy enough to be able to support anyone. So having that huge trap door open was very unusual. And I asked my husband if he could go up and check to make sure there was no one up there. We just couldn't imagine. He had to pull the golf cart out, put the ladder underneath where the trapdoor was, look up above and make sure there was no one there, and then slide it back. But I was kind of thinking, I wonder if this has to do with what Morgan said. The next day, the exact same thing happened. I came home and that trapdoor was slid open again. And I know that what Morgan was saying to us is that he now is very powerful, that he can do things, he can manipulate things. And he was just explaining to us after saying, look up, hey, look what I can do now. But I want to just say a few stories that are much more important that Morgan has done with his strength that are just incredible. One of them, when he was a cheerleader at U of A, the mascot, Wilbur Wildcat, was one of his best friends. His name is Dan. And Dan decided to become a firefighter after leaving college. And one of the first jobs when he was in Peoria, he was in a garage with a friend of his who's also a firefighter. The friend had put the car in neutral. He was waiting. Dan was going to push the car out of the garage to save it. And all of a sudden, he felt two hands grabbing him from behind. He was pulled off his feet and backward, and an air conditioning unit fell right where he would have been standing.
Oh my
Knew
gosh.
Morgan, and the guy that was in the garage, he said to Dan, dude, just what just happened? He couldn't believe it. And so Dan is certain that it was Morgan that saved him.
I just
Also,
got goosebumps all over my whole body.
well, it's pretty amazing. And he named his first son after Morgan, and we're so excited about it. He's a huge part of our lives as well. Also, when my daughter was in Paris and she was going to a New Year's Eve party, it was very cold that year. It actually started snowing later in the night, but she had a tiny black cocktail dress on and a nice coat. She was there with her cousin. My husband's French, so her cousin's French as well, and her boyfriend. And she had taken an Imitrex before going because she had a migraine. When they got there, she had some champagne and she started feeling really woozy and needed to go home. She went to tell Aunt Sophie, and Aunt Sophie said, "Oh, go have fun." And I think Aunt Sophie had a little to drink. And I was thinking she was all the way on the other side of Paris from where she normally lives, which was in Saint Germain. And so Alix, instead of getting her coat at the coat check, instead of getting her purse, she just rushes out to the street, finds a taxi, jumps into it. As she gets to the first stop sign, she realizes she doesn't know the person sitting in the seat beside her. So she jumps out in this little cocktail dress. She looks up at the street sign, realizes she doesn't recognize where she is, and the snow starts to fall. And at that point, she doesn't remember anything after this. She then remembers being woken up by her three roommates. They were shaking her and saying, "We got to get to the train station. We're going to Portugal today. Come on, get up." And it was 9 in the morning the next morning. She said that her roommate heard the door being kicked in at 3 in the morning, and they are 7 floors up. And Alix knows that Morgan picked her up, carried her home, and got her to bed. And this is something that my daughter Alix is not at all like this. She's not somebody who likes to talk about this. It took her 2 years to tell me when she was living in London finally. She said, "Mom, we were just about to go to see a show." She said, "Mom, I really have to tell you this because it was pretty incredible." So these kinds of things where Morgan has saved people's lives, he also has cheerleader friends who were driving in a car, and a woman who was driving 70 miles an hour hit the car. It looks like an accordion. There are pictures that they showed on the internet. Both of them got out of their car completely unscathed, and they know that it was Morgan who helped them out of the car, who helped them during the accident as well. And this happens over and over again. So it's pretty incredible to think of how powerful they are and how they can help those that they love here on earth. Um, just even more so than they would have been able to when they were here.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Wow. My head is just reeling because I've been so used to signs and synchronicities that are like, for example, music or a screen freezing or seeing a license plate and just incredible synchronicities of multiple things happening at the same time. Only once have I ever physically felt my passed away loved one. And it was shortly after he died. I remember standing in the kitchen sink, might have been about a week or less after he died. And I was just crying. And I felt him reach from behind me and put his arms around me, and I physically felt him hug me, and I knew nobody was there, and I knew immediately it was him because I think what people have a hard time understanding when they're here is that as a soul, we have an energy signature, and it's very specific to a person. And so even though you might not see them, you have a recognition or a knowing of somebody's energy. And so I have absolutely no doubt that what you're saying is true, that those people, when they didn't see anybody, but they knew that something happened because they would have recognized an energy signature. So, what have you learned about energy signatures? Because I'm sure that you've had so many parents now also kind of explain these different things also.
I think that it happens to us all the time. And I think that a lot of times people are a little bit concerned about talking about these things to anyone except someone who maybe has a loved one who's transitioned. But I know that for me, for Morgan, the things that were happening with him, once I was able to find my tribe, it was wonderful. But in the beginning, I wanted to tell everybody. And I would go to these support meetings in 2009 and try to talk about these things that were happening. And, these trapdoors that are being open, as well as all of these other things happening that license plates that keep repeating. He drove a Toyota Tacoma red truck. And so I frequently see 3 red trucks in a row that will be coming towards me even today, which is really weird because his truck, this was back in 2009. There are still enough trucks to come towards me 3 times in a row. So this is something that always validates something that I ask Morgan. But I wanted to be able to talk about these things, and the people who were in the meetings said, oh, this isn't something that we're allowed to talk about here. And so being able to find a group of people who uh, experience the same things and who want to talk about their kids. And I think that's a very important thing too. When we have a loved one who transitions, many times friends and family, all of our friends and family that have been with us forever, have a hard time talking to us about that loved one because they think it's going to make us sad to be talking about that loved one. Whereas it's the exact opposite. All we want to do is talk about that loved one. And so it's really wonderful to find people who also want to talk about your loved one, but they also want to talk about their loved one. And we talk about them in the present tense. We don't talk about them in the past tense. We don't say that they've died. We say they've passed. And a lot of times we say they've changed worlds or they've transitioned. We don't call them lost because they aren't lost. They are more present and found than we are. Unfortunately, we're still in school and they are home now. So we still have a lot to learn, and they are happy, healthy, and whole, and they want us to be as well. And that's another thing that I think that is very important about this journey, is that a lot of people, when they have a loved one transition, they believe that loved one wants us to be sad and wants us to hold on to them and grieve and be, and grieving is another word that I don't like. I like healing better than grieving, but they don't. They want us to move forward and make them proud. And that's exactly what you're doing, what I feel Morgan thinks I'm doing as well. And I think that is something that's so important. And what I've realized from this journey is that helping others helps us so much more. Being able to reach a hand back and help someone forward is an enormous healing for us, for you, for me, and being able to let people know that our loved ones in spirit are not gone. They're still right here.
Oh my gosh. Well, I love that you're sharing these messages because I think that until a shift is made, everybody will be stuck in a place of grief. And you're right. I think that in our culture, it is almost encouraged that you mourn, that you be sad, that you are just stuck in this grief and this sadness, but you have a choice. And if you can realize that on a spiritual level, that it's a transition, it changes the perception, which then can change your own reality with how you take in this information and how you process it. And I want to point out that I feel like for people that are on the other side, time is different. Time doesn't exist in a linear fashion the way that it does here. So for the people on the other side, when they leave and they transition back into the spirit form, for them, they feel like they saw you yesterday and they feel like they're going to see you tomorrow, where for us, maybe we are on this planet 20 years, 30 years, 40, 50 years after somebody else has transitioned. But to them, it doesn't feel that way. So, of course, from a grief standpoint, they wouldn't want us to stop living. They wouldn't want us to crawl into bed and be in a ball and grieve over them, because they want to watch us and participate in our lives. And when we speak to them and we acknowledge them, they'll show up more and more. They'll send you signs if you ask them, but I think that you also have to be in a place where your vibration is a little bit higher to be able to receive that. Has that been your experience with the parents that you're working with?
Yeah, I think that it's important to be able to be in a place where you can start understanding the signs and recognizing them. And I also think that it's fine if you need time to be able to heal. And lots of parents come to us after 10 years, they didn't even know about helping parents heal before, and they worry about the time that they spent in a very unhappy way. But our kids in spirit, or our loved ones in spirit, don't feel that unhappiness. They just like for us. And again, time is not the same. It's not linear the way that it is. But again, one of the things that George Anderson wrote in Walking in the Garden of Souls is that, and he's one of these really top-notch psychic mediums, he says that when we see our kids again, it will be as though not 1 second has passed. And I believe that. I believe that our kids are actually participating in everything that we do already. I feel that when I sleep, I spend time with Morgan and with Chelsea. I don't necessarily always remember the dreams when I wake up, but I know that I've been with them because I have a really good feeling when I get up. And I wake up every morning feeling enormous gratitude for the day, for the fact that I can maybe reach out and help different parents that day, that I might be interviewing someone that I'm really excited that parents will learn about that evening. And I think that this journey changes. It's, again, as I say, it can be very magical because all of these things that we never even realized existed, never were even interested in researching. I think I read 80 books the first year when Morgan.
Yes,
I keep reading them because
ditto.
recommended reading for helping parents heal. So we, check it out and make sure that it's okay to go on the reading list. It has to be helpful, hopeful, and healing. It has to actually speak
Oh,
about a connection with our loved one in the afterlife. And it has to be non-dogmatic because that's another part of our group. We welcome every religion. We don't require anyone to believe the way that we do. If people want to believe differently and maybe kind of observe for a while and see what happens, that's completely fine as well. But I think that is an important part of the healing journey because many people have been brought up in a way uh, that led them to believe that our kids can either go one place or another place. Either they've been good their whole lives and they go to a good place, or they've been bad, or they did something bad at the end and they go to a bad place. That is completely incorrect because everyone goes to the same place. And
yes, amen.
there's spiritual healing that happens when we get over there, but nobody puts them there. They just decide on their own after their life review, hey, I think I'm going to just spend a little time here and feel a little bit better, almost like a spa. And then, but I've also heard that it's kind of like a cocoon. It's just something that's very healing. And then be ready to interact with everyone else who's there. I feel that knowing all of this, knowing that there's nothing bad that's waiting for anybody, but also that our life review and the things that we do in this world really affect the way that we interact once we get over there, or else more precisely that the people who are over there are watching us and they are rooting for us, they're cheering for us, and they really want us to make a difference while we're here on earth. And so all of the material things don't matter. The things that matter are kindness and love. And I think that being able to use love as a guiding principle for our lives while we're here is very important to our loved ones in spirit.
Oh, I could not agree more. And I think further than just our loved ones rooting for us and wanting us to have happiness, they can also help us. We can call on them. We can ask for them to help us. I know Mark helped me with my book, with my paintings. He's always guiding me. I know Morgan helped you with your book, with your helping parents heal. So, why don't we talk a little bit about this organization? And I'd like to know a little bit more. You said that you have this entire list of all these books. And when we lose somebody, I think sometimes it can begin a spiritual transition to where we start to become more open to, is this all that we are? Are we just this body walking around on this earth? Or is there more? Is there a spirit? And a lot of us do begin to want to read more, want to watch different movies, want to have different conversations than we've ever had before. And we begin to your point, seek our tribe. And you mentioned that you have this list of books that are not only there help, they have to be hopeful, helpful, and healing. So, can you share a little bit about that? Because I'm so curious about what you've put together.
Yes, I would love to. We have a group of readers who read the books, and we have different lists. We have experts from the afterlife and grief community. We also, so that's one book, one list, and that has hundreds of books on it. We also have books that are written by Shining Light parents, and we call ourselves Shining Light parents instead of bereaved parents because bereaved is probably one of the most, the saddest words in the dictionary. So Suzanne Giesman, who is one of our recommended providers, meditated on this, and we all love this because the light of our kids shines through us. So we have Shining Light parents, Shining Light dads, we have Shining Light siblings as well, Shining Light grandparents, and I just think it's a much more appropriate term. We also have books in Spanish because we have a very large Spanish group for helping parents heal. We have books that are specifically for kids. So any kids who have had either their siblings or their moms and dads or someone that's very close to them transition, but this is in a younger form. Also on the site, we have books in Norwegian and in Swedish as well. And then we're going to be adding more and more because we have caring listeners who speak 13 different languages, and they're volunteer parents who have gone down the healing path a bit further and who reach a hand back to help others forward. We have them all over the world. So we have Cantonese speaking, we have Mandarin speaking, we have Arabic speaking, we have French, Spanish, let's see, German, as well as Swedish and Norwegian, as well as Romanian. Let's see, I said Spanish already, Hindi, obviously. So there are 12 or 13 different languages. Afrikaans was the last one that we just added. And it's really important for parents to be able to reach out to someone and have someone speak to them in their own language. And I feel very grateful that we can do that. We also have affiliate groups that are throughout the world. So right now we're located in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, as well as the UK and Norway, Sweden, Romania, South Africa, as well as India and Australia, New Zealand. And we're expecting to expand into quite a few more countries very soon because we have a lot of affiliate leaders who are interested in doing so. But this allows people to attend Zoom meetings or in-person meetings in their time zone, which is something that's really nice to be able to do. And we hold probably 20 meetings a week in different areas of the country and the world. And they're all meetings that, well, we have special meetings for siblings. So we have a helping siblings group. So A lot of times siblings don't want their parents to be in on the meetings, obviously. It's interesting because siblings have a very difficult road towards healing because they feel that they need to heal their parents before they can heal themselves. And so a lot of times, I'm sure that when they have their meetings, they're saying, "Oh my gosh, my mom was just crazy the other day. She spent the whole day in bed and I couldn't get her out of bed." And, it's nice for them to be able to commiserate about these kinds of things and figure out solutions, these issues that they're facing. We also have special interest groups. So we have Moving Forward After Suicide, we have Moving Forward After Substance Use, or parents of children of substance use. We have parents of children with special needs who have transitioned. We also have parents of LGBTQ who have transitioned as well. And it's not because we feel that any of these exit points are any different. It's only because of the fact that these parents feel that society makes it so that they feel different and they want to be able to be in a group with people who are like-minded. And when I say these, I maybe said four of them, we probably have 20 different special interest groups, which is really nice as well. So we have a lot of resources for people if they need them. We have the book as well. And we're also coming out with two more books. So this is Life to Afterlife, Helping Parents Heal, the book. This is 20 different parents who have moved forward and healed, and they explain how they do it. We're also coming out with Helping Fathers Heal, which is a book specifically about dads, which is a different way to heal. They have a different healing trajectory. Again, they're similar to the siblings. They feel like they have to make sure that their wife is okay and their families are okay before they can start to feel like they're okay. And so that book is coming out in just a few weeks. And then we also have another book that is going to be written about the 160 plus caring listeners and affiliate leaders that were interviewed by Dr. Mark Pitstick, and about their healing trajectories. And he asked them 5 specific questions in a series of interviews that are on our website as well. And so that should be coming out within another month or so as well. So there are a lot of different books coming out.
I just want to say, I don't think people who watch understand the amount of effort that goes into creating an organization like this. You are tireless in having conversations, in making connections with other people, in organizing. And because I know you, I just want to say you are so intelligent and articulate. You have such a high vibration. And I want to thank you for taking the woo out of these types of topics, because when we have people who are obviously, you can tell, high level intelligent, and a lot of times when we are scientific, we don't tend to transition into these areas that are less scientific based, although we're getting better with quantum physics. We're understanding more about consciousness and about what we really are and how things work. But these things are still not completely mainstream. These topics are still not completely mainstream. To your point, you went to all of these different organizations and you were told over and over again, you can't share this story, you can't talk about this, it only has to be this. And so you took those conversations had in the parking lot and you were like, I'm going to do my own thing so I can have these conversations. And this has grown. Tell people how big this organization is now.
Of course, I would love to. And actually, first of all, the Facebook group has over 27,000 people on it, which is actually a big selection. We don't allow everyone onto the Facebook group because a lot of these groups that are for supposedly grieving, they accept everyone into the groups. We can't do that. We are so super careful. We look at the children, make sure that they actually have transitioned. We don't want to have anyone coming into the group who might be soliciting anything from any of our members. And it's a safe place for parents and families to heal. I also just really quickly want to say that we've had two conferences in the past. Both of them sold out. The first one was 500 parents. The second one was 900 at the Sheraton Wild Horse Pass. This year we're having one in August, and we always have incredible keynote speakers. We have Eben Alexander and Raymond Moody, and a lot of other wonderful afterlife speakers. This year we're going to have Anita Merjani joining us as well. Dr. Mary Neal was with us 2 years ago as well. We have James Van Prague, who you might have heard of, as well as Suzanne Wilson, who is the one that actually did the reading for me in the very beginning. Suzanne Giesman, Mark Anthony, who is an evidence-based, he's written several books about evidence for the afterlife, but Dr. Gary Schwartz, who's working on the soul phone in Tucson, actually. Gordon Smith, who is coming all the way from the UK, and he is one of the most well-known psychic mediums in Europe and in the world as well. And then we have Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, as well as Jeffrey Olson, who are both near-death experiencers like Dr. Mary Neal and Maureen Hancock. So those are our keynote speakers. And then we have 44 presenters in all who are going to be at the conference, and 1,000 parents who are attending. It sold out months ago, unfortunately, but we still have a waiting list, and it's just so wonderful to be able to have all of these like-minded people in the same place and spending time together. And this is something that Irene Vouvoulidis, who is our vice president of Helping Parents Heal, wanted to do from the very beginning. Conferences are very difficult to organize, and they usually lose a lot of money. We haven't had that experience with Irene, and she and I work on this day and night to make sure that it will be the most incredible experiences for the parents as possible.
Wow, that is incredible. I'm sad for the people that are watching that it's sold out, but there are a couple of names that you mentioned that I'm interviewing in the next couple of months that will actually be out before August, so people can connect with them. But Mark Anthony, I've already talked to. His interview will be coming out in May. Dr. Eben Alexander, I'm talking to, I think, in 2 weeks. George Anderson in 3 weeks, and Jeffrey Olson next week. So all of these people, if you've heard these names before and they speak to you, I'll be connecting these as links on this interview as they live in perpetuity. So you can connect with some of these people if you can't attend a conference like this. But yes, it's just an incredible amount of work.
We do have a waiting list though, so we always are able to get everyone that we have on the waiting list into the conference, even though we always feel like it's the kids that do so. And we're even thinking about expanding the number of people that can attend. The hotel itself only holds a certain number of people, but it has a sister property that's also almost completely booked up right now. And it's just one of the most incredible experiences. But I am excited that you're interviewing all of these people. They're all very close friends, and I'm excited that you're going to be speaking. Oh my goodness.
I
All
know.
are such,
Again, are all of our synchronicities. It's just so crazy, Elizabeth.
yeah, it is. And please say hi to all of them for me, especially Jeffrey, since you're going to be speaking to him next week. And
Next
he's
week, yeah.
such a great guy.
What an amazing story. I mean, just an amazing story. Oh
And
my
in
gosh.
fact, it's so funny because I am always recommending his book, Knowing.
Just have it sitting there.
I have it sitting here because I'm always talking about Jeffrey. He's just amazing. And he's also done so many interviews just by Zoom for us for our YouTube channel. And anyway, I'm sure that this is going to be, all of those are going to be wonderful interviews. Thank you so much for doing what you do. This is wonderful that you're interviewing all of these wonderful people, that you've written your book, and that you are raising awareness about the fact that we don't die.
I'm so passionate about this. I just don't think that there's anything more important right now than trying to help people understand that love does not die. We are never alone. We have so much help. All we have to do is begin to notice the signs and the synchronicities. And I think by sharing stories like this, when people can understand how we connected with our loved ones and how we get signs, I think they can extrapolate that information then to be able to understand how it might work for them with their own loved ones and their individual stories. And so the more we do this, the more that people can connect. It's kind of, I feel like, breaking the 4 minute mile. Like for a long time, people thought that wasn't possible. And as soon as one person did it, it's like, boom, all these other people can. And so when somebody stumbles, and I use that with air quotes because there are no accidents, for the people who have found this video, who are watching it and who are seeking, for them to understand that we've been able to do it. We've been able to connect with our loved ones through evidential mediums, through signs and synchronicities, then they understand that they can do the same. And then that opens up something like the 4 minute mile did. And that can change lives because, to your point earlier, the ripple effect is one of the most powerful things. And why should we wait until we have our life review to see what we've done? We can start impacting our own ripple effect right now, right this very minute, with every interaction. And that's what you're doing.
Thank you. And that's where we find the collateral beauty in all of the things that we've experienced. And I am so grateful to have met you
Me
and
too.
to know that you're here in Cave Creek.
I know, no accidents. Thank you so much for what you're doing, what you're sharing, for the joy. I mean, I can see, I think everybody watching can feel the pure joy that you are. You are not doing this because you're trying to make money, because you're trying to sell something. You are doing this out of the love that you receive from Morgan, that you're just taking and sending into the world. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
I'd like to just say one last thing. In the very beginning, and I do this almost every meeting, I've always said that the day that we have succeeded is the day that we have nobody show up for a meeting, because they all get it and they all go out into the world and are happy and they don't need this. But it doesn't happen that way, because all of the people who have moved further down on their healing journey, they want to reach a hand back and help somebody else forward. And plus, we just unfortunately always have more and more children who transition. So there are always people that are here for meetings, but I really don't want to be doing this forever. I want people to get it and then just understand and not need it. But it is something that for now is needed. And so I love doing it. And thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, again, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for watching.
As thank you.